As Christians, sometimes we forget. Sometimes we forget that the whole purpose of everything we do is to have Christ indwell us so that He can then become palpable for other people around us. My name is Father Daniel Fanous. I'm an Orthodox priest in southern Sydney, and so today I'd like to share with you something that's quite important to me and should be important to all of us, which is this idea of self-emptying, that Christ empties Himself for our sakes, and then that means that we also need to empty ourselves for the sake of others.
So do you have a family?
Yeah, I do. So I've got a beautiful wife, Sherry, and 3 kids, Chloe, Luke and Mia. We actually just celebrated Chloe's 9th birthday yesterday. So I love them to death. They cause me blood pressure, but I love them to death. Yeah. So this idea of self-emptying is probably something that came to me very, very strongly years ago, probably a couple of decades ago now, when I was spent a bit of time in an orphanage in Sudan. And while I was there staying in some convents, some of the nuns invited me to visit a particular place where they were looking after some kids that had been orphaned and had gone through quite traumatic periods of their lives given the wars that were happening in Sudan at the time. And so then, as we were talking, they were telling me about their mission and what they were doing. I saw this little child come running out, probably about 2 years old, 3 years old, and the child had diarrhea, and so had literally had diarrhea all over its legs, running down its legs, and was running, and they couldn't catch the child. And then I saw quickly some lady come running who was not Sudanese. She looked like she was probably from a Filipino background, who came running and then just quickly scooped up the child, didn't even worry about what was going on to her, kissed him in the midst of his diarrhea, and then started to clean him. And so I said to one of the nuns, "Oh, she maybe one of the sisters in training, one of the novices?" She said, "Oh, no. She goes, "Look across the Nile River." And so I looked across the river, and there was the Hilton Hotel. She's the wife of the owner of the Hilton in Sudan. She goes, she comes here every week and she takes care of the children. And so for me, that really pressed this idea of self-emptying, something that Christ Himself did. When, as it says in Philippians 2, that He emptied Himself for our sakes, that He humbled Himself for our sakes, that He was in the status of God and then gave up everything for us, became a slave. The word that we use in some of the translations is bondservant. It's not strong enough. The word is slave. He became a slave for us. And so this woman who had probably one of the highest statuses out of anyone in Sudan was offering herself and emptying herself of all of that status. Wouldn't even worry about getting diarrhea on her clothes, even though the rest of us were looking on in disgust. And so I think this is something that we need, especially today, this idea of giving ourselves, of emptying ourselves for the sakes of others.
And you haven't always been a Coptic priest. What did you do before?
Yeah, so before I was a priest, I was actually a GP, so I was a medical doctor, which I did for a number of years. And it's something that I loved quite deeply. And to be honest, becoming a priest was continuous in that respect, because it's a very similar kind of work. You're caring for people, loving people. But becoming a priest was actually quite a, as you can imagine, quite a challenge for me. It was quite a struggle. For example, going from wearing boardies all day and shorts all day to putting this on was quite interesting. But it has its kind of benefits as well, in terms of you're marked out. People know you're a priest, so people often come up to me and ask, "Hi Father, could I have a chat with you? Hi Father, could you say a prayer for me?" But it was one of the struggles for me becoming a priest, was obviously the clothes. But now I'm used to it, yeah. And so if you ever see me dressed like this, know that I'm a priest. What's the next question?
It's a good question.
So maybe we'll just head to the chapel. This is our chapel where we celebrate liturgy, which is quite nice for the students to come and pray. We normally pray every Tuesday morning, and it's a beautiful candlelit liturgy where we celebrate and worship Christ. That emptying, or that self-emptying that happens, is then something that hurts, and I think that's something which makes us a bit fearful, that we don't want to cross over there, we don't want to empty ourselves from others because it hurts. And it reminds me of something that Mother Teresa once said to some sisters that were in training. She said to them, the more you love Christ, the more you come into intimate communion with Him. Just like with your spouse, you want to embrace Him. And as you go to embrace Him and as you go to kiss Him, you'll find that as you come closer and closer to Him, that His thorns will pierce you. But you keep embracing, and the more you embrace Him, the more they pierce you. And so it's almost like there is a price to the kiss. There's a price to the embrace of Christ. And it's something that St. Paul talks about everywhere. This idea that we are only going to experience the resurrection of Christ, we're only going to experience the co-glorification with Christ if we're co-crucified with Him. And so if Christ empties Himself for our sakes, and that hurts, that comes at a price. The same thing for us. We need to empty ourselves for Christ, empty ourselves for our neighbour, empty ourselves for our colleagues, for our friends, for our family, for our enemies. And in doing that, it will hurt. There will be piercing. There will be thorns entering us. But when we do that, we should know that that pain is not something we should escape from. That pain is actually something that is the glory of being with Christ. And so I think this is something that today we need. Because today, when we're becoming more selfish, more inward-looking, more scared, more insular, more fearful, especially given the circumstances in the world at the moment, where we're so scared of touching even other people, embracing other people, now is the time that we need to empty ourselves for each other. Of course, taking the required precautions, but emptying ourselves for each other, loving each other, even when it hurts, even when it comes with a price.
So, Father Dan, what is one of the biggest challenges you have in your role?
Yeah, probably one of the biggest challenges that we're finding now is this trying to win the right again to speak about Christ in our society, which has become almost post-Christian, where almost the definition of living in Australian society these days is that you just don't care. I don't care about faith. I have no concern about faith. I have no concern about Christ. I don't need Him. And so somehow communicating the love and the mercy and the healing that God brings when people don't need that or feel they don't need that, I think that's one of the hardest things. My hope is that for all of us, that in the coming weeks, in the coming days, that we look for those opportunities. We don't run away from those opportunities, but we look for those opportunities where we can offer ourselves to others, we can empty ourselves, we can go through that struggle of denying ourselves so that we can give something of Christ to the people around us. God bless you all.